One of my first memories of my mother is when I'm about 4 years old. We're out on the balcony, and the sun is reflecting off of my freshly shaved head. This is right after the Mundan ceremony, which is a Hindu ritual where you shave a baby's first head. And since I've been rocking the bald look, my mom likes to dress me up like a baby monk. So here I am, all Buddha'd up, and she bends down to my level, and she looks at me with a very serious expression on her face, and I'm 4, mind you, and she says to me, "Smriti, you can never trust men. Women have to be financially independent." Yes. Now, I love my mom, and as you can tell, she's unique. And she's given me a unique childhood. She raised me in a world filled with books and trashy TV. Growing up, our favorite activities included going to the bookstore, where I could buy 7 books at a time, which was a limit that I had imposed on myself. And then as I would get older, we would spend every Sunday in bed eating junk and watching TV. My mother, who is a middle-aged Indian woman, loved the Fast and Furious franchise. But the thing that I loved most about my childhood is that my mother raised me with this sense of magic in the world, okay? She is eccentric and esoteric. She bought me my first deck of tarot cards, and till this date maintains that I'm a very gifted medium. I grew up hearing stories of her doing astral projection and past life regression therapy, and even stories of her meeting shamans and witches and generally magical people. There was this one year where she really got into Vastu, which is the Indian version of Feng Shui, and she redid our entire home so that every room had the right color according to the different zones in Vastu. Now, my bedroom was in the red zone, and there was no red in it. And so, obviously, she went ahead and installed a red light bulb with no off switch. And so for months, I slept in what looked like the set of a low-budget horror film. But you know what? I loved it. I loved it because I have carried this sense of magic with me throughout my life. And what this translates to is that nothing in my life is random, okay? Everything is a sign or a synchronicity, part of a larger cosmic plan. And so, in the second year of the pandemic, when I matched with Derek, that too takes on a fate-like quality, right? Now, Derek, he felt like my personal magic. It was like he was tailor-made to scratch every itch that I had. I mean, we didn't go on dates. We would have experiences. The first time we met, he gave me a full taxonomy of Montreal sunsets, and that's when I knew I was in trouble. The second time we hung out, we went looking for the moon, and quite literally because he had downloaded an app on his phone that showed us the best location to go see the moonrise in Montreal. So that's where we went, and we had our first kiss under the stars. On another date, we got wasted and danced in his living room and made up songs on his guitar, and for 3 months, it felt like we were just obsessed with each other. I mean, he would compliment and adore everything about me, from the way that I talked and the way that I dressed, the way that I walked, and one time, even the way that I flicked my cigarette. And then suddenly, it stopped. I stopped hearing from him. And when I finally got a hold of him, he told me that he was seeing other people, that he didn't want to see me anymore. Now, I believe that the technical term for this phenomenon is love bombing. An accurate description, because even though we had only hung out for 3 months, when he broke up with me, I felt like my insides had been shattered. And so I reacted to this the only way that a normal person can. I got really into crystals. Yeah, Yeah, I did. And you know what? For a while, it made me feel better. But I'm nothing if not a woman of action. So I needed to do something to change my circumstances, right? And so I started doing research. I started obsessively consuming the content of internet dating guru Matthew Hussey, especially his program that promises that just for $15.99 US dollars, you can get your ex back. So of course I downloaded that, I tried it, it didn't work, no worries, on to the next experiment. In a moment of desperation that ended up lasting a month, I began posting poems that I would write to my Instagram every single day for 30 days in order to try and impress him. Well, far from impressed, Derek was weirded out, and my poetry was crap. Uh, it was like no matter what I did, I couldn't convince him to give us another shot. And so after I had cycled through all of the crazy, I decided to try something else, right? I decided to go to therapy. And for the first couple of weeks, I spent hundreds of dollars just like, talking my therapist's ear off about like all the details of our relationship. And then slowly, eventually, as one does in therapy, I began to talk about my parents, more specifically about my mother. And things started to come up, things that I hadn't thought about for a while, things that I had ignored, not remembered. And I remember being 8 years old and spending a lot of time just hiding out in my bathroom every time my parents would have their blowout fights. And then afterwards, going up to my mother and consoling her as she would cry and tell me these horrible things about my dad. And this would confuse me because I loved my dad. He was a good dad, but also because my mother, she seemed so unbearably sad, and yet she was unable to leave him. You know that moment when you realize that your parents aren't perfect? Well, this was not it, okay? I'd already had that moment at the age of 8 years old. Now, in my mid-20s, sitting in my therapist's office, it seemed that I was graduating into really putting the pieces together of how all of this crap had shaped me. You see, this is how I understood it. My father was emotionally unavailable towards my mother, and so that's how she ended up being with me. Whatever she couldn't get from that relationship, she got from her career. She's a very successful writer, and over the years, she has poured all of her love and her care and energy into the worlds that she creates, into the books that she writes. And after all of that, she just doesn't have much left to give to me. I mean, what else would explain the fact that, like, in the 10 years since I've left home, I can count on one hand the amount of times that she has picked up the phone to initiate a phone call? Or, the fact that like every time we talk, she never asks me any questions about myself or shows any curiosity about my life. But when I ask her how her writing is going, she, comes alive. Her work is her lifeline. And so she values it more than anything, more than her health, more than her husband, and even her kids. And FYI, folks, those are her words, not mine. And so, realizing all of this, I realized that all of the above, it made me into the type of person who believed that she had to work for love. And this belief is what led me to chase all the wrong men. Derek wasn't the first, and for a couple of years, he wouldn't be the last. But you know what the worst part is? The worst part? Because of the kooky-ass environment that she had raised me in, it had also made me the type of person who had a penchant for spending a lot of money on expensive rocks when things started to go hard. And so, realizing all of this, I was so angry. I carried so much resentment with me, and in this anger, I would pick fights with her. And one day, I said to her, totally unprovoked, that, you know what, Mom? I may not know what it is that I want in my relationship, but I know what I don't want, and that's what you have with Dad. And she just looked at me, and she said to me, with zero anger or sadness or even disappointment, she just said, okay, well, you'll make different choices. You'll make different choices. I love my mom. I really do. She's one of my favorite people in the entire world. And as hard as I try, I cannot escape her. I see her in the shape of my hands, in the way that I walk. I hear her voice in my head every time I move into a new apartment, and I feel paranoid until all the rooms have the right colors according to Vastu. And there are also things that I've inherited from her that I still struggle with to this day. You know, like I've never quite managed to move past my 4-year-old's distrust of men, and I still derive way too much of my self-worth from my job. But then there are mornings when I wake up, I put on music, and a song comes on that feels like a message from the universe, just for me. And in that moment, I feel so perfectly in sync with the magic of the world. And that magic, that's her too. And as I begin to make my own choices, that's the part I choose to keep. Thank you for listening.